absolutely can go straight to the listing agent when buying a home. And a lot of buyers are doing exactly that right now, thinking it's the smartest move. No buyer's agent, less commission, better deal. On the surface, totally logical. I get it. Especially if you're the one scrolling on Zillow at night, tracking the price drops, touring the open houses, researching neighborhoods, and doing what feels like most of the work. So the assumption becomes if there's no buyer's agent involved, that money should benefit me. Lower price, more closing costs, some sort of advantage. But here's what almost no one explains up front. That money doesn't automatically come back to you as the home buyer, and assuming it does can quietly cost you thousands of dollars. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a real situation that happened to me where that exact assumption almost cost my buyers a lot of money, and one pause changed the outcome by $12,000. Stick with me because this is the part no one explains at the open house. I hear buyers say this to me all the time. I'm the one doing all the work. I found the house. I'm watching the market. Honestly, what is a buyer's agent even doing? And I get why that question comes up, especially in this day and age with all the technology and information we have at our fingertips. But today's buyers are informed. You know the neighborhoods, you know what you like, you know your budget, you know what's been sitting and what's moving. And before I go any further, just so you understand where I'm coming from, I work with buyers and sellers, so I understand both sides of this argument. So this isn't about me saying you have to use a buyer's agent, use me. It's not about that. I just want to explain how deals actually work in real life so you understand before you make that decision. Today, I want to do three things. First, explain why this belief even exists and why it sounds reasonable. Second, show you what usually happens instead when buyers go straight to the listing agent. And third, give you practical ways to protect yourself if you're buying, whether you use an agent or not. Because this isn't about being pro-agent or anti-agent. I just want to give you the information. It's about understanding the mechanics of a deal and not letting a myth quietly work against you. So here's the belief most buyers have. If the seller doesn't have to pay a buyer's agent, they'll lower the price for me. Or I'll just ask for that money in closing costs, or the listing agent will give me a better deal if I work directly with them. Could those things happen? Absolutely. Do they usually? No. In most listing agreements, the seller has already agreed to pay a buyer's agent compensation before you ever see the house. That's built into the listing from day one. So when a buyer decides to go directly to the listing agent, that money doesn't just disappear. It has to go somewhere. And this is the part buyers don't hear clearly enough. Sellers do not typically say, "Oh, great, there's no buyer's agent. Let's just hand that money to the buyer." What usually happens is one of two things. Either the listing agent earns more by doing both sides of the transaction because they're doing double the work, doing double the paperwork, all the things. Or the seller tries to keep as much of that as savings as they possibly can. But very rarely does it turn into an automatic credit for an unrepresented buyer. That's the assumption, that savings flow downhill to the buyer is where people get tripped up. So let me give you a real world example, and this literally just happened to me about 2 months ago. I had clients, actually friends of mine, who went to an open house on their own. I didn't even realize they were seriously looking yet. They loved the house. They were interested. And the listing agent immediately started encouraging them to work directly with her. On paper, that sounds appealing. One point of contact, fewer people involved, feels efficient. But something just didn't quite sit right with them. They felt pressure, they felt a little rushed by her, so they called me and said, "Can we talk through this? Something just doesn't feel right." And listen, this isn't about the listing agent being bad or unethical. She was not. Her job was to protect the seller's interest, and that's exactly what she was doing. So the real question in moments like this is this: where is that leverage actually coming from? Here's what I saw when I looked at the deal. The seller was already offering a buyer's agent compensation. The agent told me so. The home had been on the market for a while and the house was vacant. Vacant tells you a lot. It usually means the sellers have already moved on, they're carrying extra cost, and they're more motivated than they look. And instead of just thinking about the price, I thought about the structure. How can this deal actually help the buyers? Because if my clients had gone direct, the buyer agent compensation would not have turned into a price reduction. The sellers were actually firm on their price. It would not have automatically shown up as closing cost either, because they were fighting on that as well. It would have stayed on the listing side. So instead, I negotiated. We kept the buyer's agent compensation in place, and we used the seller's situation, days on market, and vacancy as leverage. Had to play a little hardball, but we did it. The result, an additional $12,000 in closing cost for my buyers. And I can tell you with absolute confidence, if they had worked directly with the listing agent, that credit or the closing cost would have never happened. Not because she was doing anything wrong, but because her responsibility was to the seller's bottom line. And that's the difference between a deal just happening and a deal being negotiated. This is where buyers often misunderstand what's really at stake. When you work directly with the listing agent, you don't gain leverage. You lose an advocate. If the listing agent is responsible for protecting the seller's price and also guiding you through the deal, who is actually negotiating for you? Who is pushing for your closing cost? Who is framing the inspection request strategically? And who is timing vacancy and compensation as leverage? In my client's case, that $12,000 did not come from goodwill, I promise you. It came from knowing where the pressure existed and how to apply it. This is a pattern I see over and over and over again. Buyers assume that cutting out a buyer's agent automatically improves the deal, but what usually happens is this. The seller doesn't lower the price, the buyer doesn't get closing cost, the listing agent actually earns more, and the buyer navigates the transaction without someone solely focused on them. The problem isn't that buyers want a better deal. That's reasonable. Of course, everyone does. The problem is assuming the deal structure will favor you without someone actively making it do so. Deals don't get better by accident. Someone has to ask and justify. So let's talk about how to protect yourself. Stop assuming the buyer's agent equals savings for you. If you don't negotiate intentionally, nothing automatically improves. Second, understand where the buyer's agent compensation actually goes. If you don't use it strategically, it usually stays on the listing side. Third, recognize the value of emotional stability. Buyers are emotional. That's completely normal. Emotion is expensive. Fourth, don't confuse easy with better. Fewer people doesn't mean more protection. And fifth, if you do choose to go direct, be honest about what you're giving up. Independent negotiation, leverage, and someone whose solely job is to protect you. So here's the bottom line. The idea that going directly to the listing agent gets you a better deal sounds good. But in real transactions, not theory, it often benefits everyone except for the buyer. The better question isn't, how do I cut agents out? It's this. Who is actually advocating for me in this deal? And I know what some buyers are thinking. I'm a strong negotiator. I can handle this myself. And listen, you might be right, but real estate negotiation isn't just about asking for money. It's about knowing what to ask for, when to ask, and how to frame it so it actually gets results. There are things buyers push on all the time that don't move the needle at all. And there are things that experienced agents spot immediately, things that create real leverage that most buyers wouldn't even think to touch. That perspective comes from seeing these deals play out again and again. And in my client's case, one pause and one shift strategy made a $12,000 difference. That's not theory, that's real. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.